Everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I know we have people joining us from Asia, Europe, and the Americas today, so a very warm welcome to you all. This is the webcast entitled Keeping on Track with Infor Risk and Compliance, which is the new name for the Approva technology, formerly known as BizRights. And today we're sharing experiences, capabilities, vision, and roadmap for you all. This is exclusively a customer webcast, so this is for you to learn what you need, get as much information as possible to work out how to get the best out of your investment in the technology and see what the future holds. Before we get into the webcast, I would like just to make it clear that we want your questions and comments as we go through. So in the GoToWebinar interface, you'll see a place to ask questions. So please ask questions as you go through. As I say, this is for you. So the more questions you ask, the more information you're going to get. If you have any technical issues with the webcast, then use the same format and one of our folks will get to help you. So today's panel is these charming people. I'm Dan French, I'm the founder and the CEO of Consider Solutions. I'm today in Seattle at the Global Process Owners Summit, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Tom Passe, who's the Product Manager for Infor Risk and Compliance out of Minneapolis. Hans van Ness, who's a COO at Consider Solutions from Amsterdam, and Steve Rooney, who's one of our most experienced managing consultants and deployment experts and business value experts for Infor Risk and Compliance. So these are the people that are going to share thoughts with you. There's a lot of experience here, and some of us have over 12 years experience with this technology. So, few words about Consider Solutions. Many of you, or most of you, know us already, but we're helping organizations like yourselves on this road to world-class finance, which in our definition is helping the business drive better business results, reducing the cost of finance, optimizing cash flow and having better risk management. And the key themes within that are financial control and compliance, which is obviously very central to most organizations' use of Approva, broader risk assurance, and finance process optimization, which is becoming more and more of a key topic. Our customers, either a selection of our customers, I think you're all on the webcast, and many others, so thank you, but you're all here. So we do have a lot to cover, a lot of information to share. This is our agenda for the day. I'm making the introduction. I'm going to talk to you briefly about what's changing in the business environment, because governance, risk, and compliance really was coined after Sarbanes-Oxley, and that term has been used, as I say, for about 12 years, and there have been some substantial changes. Then Hans van Ness is going to share some of the key challenges and critical success factors for governance, risk, and compliance and IRC version 10. Steve Rooney will talk to us about some customer case studies and experiences with the new version. We'll hear again from Hans about recent capabilities around the technology and what customers are doing with that. Tom Passe will come in with the Infor Risk and Compliance product update and roadmap plans. Steve Rooney will share best practices and recommendations, and I'll come in at the end to share some considerations for a deeper dive on some of the topics we've discussed and conclusions. And of course, Q&A at the end. So please ask your questions and as we go through. So, what is changing in the business environment that we're operating in? So this chart is, I've used quite a lot of these. This one, I'm using one from KPMG here just to be fair to everybody. But this is a chart I think anybody in the world of finance and risk and compliance will identify with. Sarbanes-Oxley came in the 2000s, and the effort and focus on financial control was enormous, as we know. But since then, we've also had the efficiency drive, the simplification and standardization drive, the greater vision for finance in terms of partnering with the business on financial performance, and a more sophisticated view of risk. So if we look at the shift between the 2000s to the 2020 time frame, we're seeing a much reduced effort or cost of financial operations because we're standardizing, simplifying, and automating. We're looking at reducing the cost of financial controls, making that more effective and more efficient. Obviously, it's part of what we're doing here today. And also driving financial performance, partnering with the business, getting better risk management, and driving more value. So we've got a kind of perfect storm of a number of issues in the landscape. On the left-hand side, despite the wonders of the technology we deploy and the ERP systems we use and embedded controls and the rest of it, we're still seeing, you know, the average loss to fraud, waste and error of about 5% of revenue for organizations, and that's the ACFE number, which seems to doesn't seem to change very much. The bottom left, you see the PwC survey on economic crime and the breakdown on where the diverted assets and cash go. And the top right, really this is bringing together the fact that in the past 10, 15 years, we've really had a massive focus on end-to-end global integration of our processes. And these days, no one person really sees a full process execution end-to-end. And it's in the light of that, we're also seeing the growing interest and appointment of global process owners who are actually there to provide governance and control over the whole end-to-end process. And of course, you've got the issues of error, and we're still seeing audit fees being an issue, although now it's very clear that the riskier the financial operations are, there's a direct correlation there with the audit fees that we are exposed to, so we can do something about that. The other thing that I guess that's changed in terms of the past 10 years is it's no longer just about controls. There's a very clear paradox between risk and control. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this picture because I'm sure you've all seen it before, but the key point is this is the entrance to a car park, and as you drive in, you swipe your ID card, and that little electronic barrier in the middle opens up and lets you through, and then the same on the way out. And every 3 months it's checked, and it works 100% of the time. So as an electronic automated control, it's provably correct, works 100% of the time. But you can see from the tire tracks in the snow that the risk is still not fully mitigated. And that's a really important paradox that we've become aware of, and we're helping customers with, and certainly your use of Approva, Infor Risk Compliance, can help address both the control and the risk. And in terms of managing risk and control, the mandate these days is understanding that there is a gap between what should happen and what actually does happen, but finding those gaps, improving the business processes, both from a performance point of view and a control point of view, and eliminating some of these unpleasant side effects we see there. And then, of course, on the same token, we've got this kind of an end-to-end risk management focus now. A broader set of risks are emerging. We need a framework, and enterprise risk management has emerged as that framework, helping us go from risk, the policies that help mitigate the risk, the controls that we need to test to ensure the policies are working, the monitoring of those, and the monitoring of actual business activity to ensure nothing gets through. So what does that really mean in terms of what's changing? Sarbanes-Oxley emerged 14 years ago as a reaction to corporate fraud. The primary driver was then really a push to clarify and demonstrate an effective system of internal control. And segregation of duties was the issue du jour. These things are still important, but business processes are integrating, they're getting more global. Simplify and standardize is the business mantra now. We've got shared services maturing, we've got global process ownership, we've got risk management becoming more complex, and corporate governance more nuanced. So quite a lot has changed in the business environment, and it's important we consider that as we start to work out how best to exploit the technology in Infor Risk and Compliance. So with that as an introduction, I'd like to introduce Hans van Ness, COO at Consider, to talk a little bit about key challenges, critical success factors for GRC and IRC 10.
Thank you, Dan. I want to pick up where you left it in the previous slide on this pyramid of the things we have to attend to in enterprise risk management. Some organizations have tried to define and implement a complete pyramid, some have implemented a slice, and some have made it to a few of these levels. And we started with it, a nice top-down approach, and we hoped that that would resolve all our problems and that the miracles would automatically happen, that everybody lives up to what we set out in the pyramid, nothing changes in our business, in our world, and everything goes perfect. But life and reality is a bit more stubborn, and we use an analogy that we stole or copied from Mr. Escher here by showing this picture and asking ourselves where is the beginning and the end. And which way the water flows. If you talk about risk and policies that should mitigate those risks, controls that should be in place to make sure that they don't happen, monitor that we do what we set out to do, and remediate, and then we are done. Well, that's not the way. The water should go back. And what we see as an example for that is looking at just one risk that you probably all know. You see a risk of expenditure getting out of control, and clockwise you go to a policy of saying, okay, no purchase order, no pay, we will implement effective segregation of duty, and then as a control we apply 2 or 3-way match, etc., etc., and we make sure that our ERPs are configured properly and that our ERP role designs support that. Then of course we monitor both if the segregation of duty is met, and last but not least we will check the real life usage in the ERP of the vendor macro and detail levels and the information we used for that. If we then still have issues, we fix them, and we also see that there are residual risks, meaning that yes, the process was met, the controls were met, but the snow trucks in this case are the fact that there might be a PO with the same day as a goods received, etc., or where the same person does both processes. And if we are smart, we reassess then the risk. We said, okay, is the policy still in order, etc., etc., and we go around and around. And to symbolize that, we rather present the enterprise risk management cycle as an end-to-end risk and performance continuous cycle. Continuous in the sense that it strives for further improvement over time, and it strives for adjustment to reality, because our businesses are constantly changing, and also the government rules are constantly changing, or the industry rules, and we have to adhere to that. So far about the process. Then we have implemented tools to help us achieve all we set out. And I borrowed the GRC hype cycle from Gartner here to see what a lot of organizations that started out with implementing initially the pyramid and maybe later a continuous improvement cycle run into, is that after the inflated expectations, the trough of delusionment came up, and a lot of people were wondering, what are we doing? Are we having tools issues here, or do we have process issues here? And that led to a number of key challenges for GRC implementations. Challenges around ownership that is deteriorated, started often triggered by either internal controls or audit or a combination of those, but in the end, over time, just became another IT system whereby the stakeholders were out of sight, where there was no proper alignment, and the GRC solution got a sort of isolated management instrument not aligned with the other KPIs. Also, the scope and purpose changed over time. As Dan said, most of the organizations started triggered because of things like SOX compliance. Maybe that is still a thing that you have to approve, but there are many other risks that you might want to manage and want to look at. And also often over time, just the segregation of duty checking for SOX compliance reasons has been defined as just a cost in the organization. And the value to the business is the question there. And of course, bottom line, this leads also to discussions on the total cost of ownership. The right technology, the right execution, and the right resources. So you could be running in this trough. So how to turn around this and get back to the plateau of productivity? Of course, answering the issues that I addressed in the previous slide. So reset the ownership, bring it back to the business, get the new set of stakeholders involved, etc. Scope, ambition level, very important, it should be redefined, and metrics should be set. make clear statements. When do you think you are clean enough to go to stay clean status? When are you ready to enlarge your scope? When is your organization able to cover monitoring of other business processes? And then, of course, bottom line, make sure that you optimize the total cost of ownership. And that is a combination of making sure you use the latest technology that is most efficient. Think about how you implement it and roll it out through your organization, even if your organization is changing through the mergers and acquisitions, and to rethink how you source the operations around the solution. That's all fine, but how do you do that? Well, we can help you with some tools to get to addressing the specific items. No two organizations are equal in this respect. So maybe you have an isolated problem and you could use one of the tools mentioned here, for instance, to readdress the ownership and or the scope and purpose. Or maybe you just want a technical health check to make sure that your operational system runs at maximum speed. If you want to go a step deeper and you want to readdress with more of a 360-degree view the way you are implemented now and the way you want to improve yourself for tomorrow, we can help you with a success framework that supports this continuous cycle that I gave in the example, the risk example before. And Steve Rooney later in this presentation will say a bit more about this methodology. Thank you, Dan. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Hans, for an insightful look through the key challenges and critical success factors. So thank you for that. I'm very pleased now to have Steve Rooney, who, as I said earlier, is a managing consultant, been with Consider Solutions for almost as long as me, a good 12 years. So a lot of experience in global technology and process deployments using the Approva and IRC technology. So Steve, over to you to tell us a little bit about some of the customer case studies.
Thank you, Dan. So we thought we'd just talk a little bit about the type of value that can be achieved through use of a continuous monitoring tool such as Infor Risk Compliance Approva. So the type of value will vary depending on how it's used and the perspective you're coming from. So to use our analogy on this slide, there are different lenses through which you can view and monitor configuration, access, and activity within your ERP systems. So we have the bottom left, we have the financial control and compliance lens. So what are we obliged to do to satisfy regulatory requirements, and what controls do we as a company need in place to ensure good, responsible governance? In the context of risk assurance at the top there, how do we monitor our systems for error, waste, and potentially fraudulent activities? And finally, how can we use monitoring to detect inefficiencies and inconsistencies in our business processes and be better placed to optimize from a speed and cost perspective? That being a particular focus for the emerging role of global business process owners. Now, first example, we've now got on the screen. So a large global manufacturer of cars, mainly implementing in this context from a control and compliance perspective. So they're monitoring user access and configuration within over 70 ERP systems with a fully automated end-to-end process from data extraction through analysis and reporting. They also have an integration between their identity management system and Infor Risk and Compliance to automatically check for SOD and sensitive access risks as part of the provisioning process. And they've recently successfully upgraded to version 10. Second example, through the risk lens, focused on travel and expense claims. So here, monitoring submitted travel claims over a 2-year period to identify duplicates and inappropriate claims. Next, the hearing care company, again Focus is control and compliance. In this case, a key value point has been enabling self-service user access requests to ERP systems in a controlled way to speed the process and reduce cost and effort needed in the ERP application management team. Finally, a combination of risk assurance and finance process optimization, monitoring key transactions such as vendor invoices over a 2-year period. Early identification, in this case of duplicate invoices, prevented duplicate payments and the consequent leakage of cash. So moving on to a couple of specific examples of projects and programs in this area. So Flowers Foods are an example of a company with high volumes of daily transactions, and the internal audit team are using IRC 10 to monitor key parts of the process, such as vendor invoices, goods receipts, and vendor master data. So the focus here is on ensuring the integrity and efficiency of business operations in this area. And the internal audit team liaise with business operations to review exceptions reported and agree on remedial actions. And at Consider, we helped the Flowers team in establishing the tool and the process to have an effective automated approach to monitoring. Another example, so BMW are the car manufacturer mentioned on the earlier slide. So some more details here. They have a range of different types of SAP systems, as well as a non-SAP treasury system. So a large, complex ERP landscape, more than 125,000 users. Again, the access from a segregation of duty, sensitive access, and user activity perspective, and the configuration of those systems are monitored using IRC 10.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for that talk through some of the customer experiences, both in Infor Risk and Compliance version 10 and more broadly. So thanks for that. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the recent capabilities that have come into the Approva IRC family surrounding the technology, and Hans is going to talk to us about that. But before we go there, please do ask questions as we go. As I say, the more questions, the more value you'll get out of this session. So thank you. So over to you, Hans. Recent capabilities.
Thanks, Dan. Yes, on top of the work Infor is doing with the product management and engineering teams to extend the capabilities and the reach of IRC, based on market demand, we have created a number of additional add-ons to the IRC technology that I want to discuss with you. I want to discuss 3 of them. The first one being SafePassage. SafePassage is a guided path to upgrade to the latest and most shiniest version of IRC. But this is not technology for technology's sake. We think if you are planning to upgrade, it is an ideal moment to reassess where you came from, where you want to go, and what the delta is and how you want to achieve that. So not only are we looking in this standardized approach to which technical elements you have to upgrade and which hardware is to be involved, but we look especially together with your stakeholders to their requirements and maybe their change requirements. We look upon history, we decide what has to be migrated, etc., etc. A standard approach, but modular in detail, and of course customized to your situation. Again, no 2 organizations are the same, size-wise, implementation-wise, and history-wise. Why would you upgrade? Well, of course, we can mention technology reasons, we can mention the fact that the older versions are going out of standard maintenance, which will bring you some additional costs and also limited support if you hit any issues. Slightly more important is the fact that the underlying technology or the technology stack underneath IRC is also changing. There are new ERP versions around, new versions of ERP modules, underlying databases, all the variants are not supported anymore by the likes of Microsoft, etc., and you want to keep up with the newest generation of secure browsers, and if possible lower your costs by having cheaper database support underneath IRC. The second part of the reasons for upgrading, I think, is more interesting. There is quite a lot of functionality created between the older 4 and 6 series and the 10 series. Many enhancement requests have been implemented in the subsequent IRC versions, and Tom will address more enhancement requests in his presentation. Most of them coming from you as a user community. And very important elements in there are things like an extended incremental extraction functionality for access control, which will lower extraction times dramatically, etc., etc. And last but not least, as I said, it's a perfect time to think about your implementation. Is the usage that you have optimal, suboptimal, both processes and technology-wise? This SafePassage solution is, of course, Infor endorsed, and if we need any help, Infor Engineering will join us. The second part that I want to introduce is another extension that we deliver. But before I do that, I want to just briefly show where we are with the IRC migration in our community. You can see that approximately 30% are already on IRC 10, and I hope that in the next few months it will pass the 50% mark. Some quotes from our customers that you see there to indicate what they think. In general, quite positive. The second addition I want to explain to you also has to do with looking at a more optimized use of the environment and to lower your cost of ownership. It's called Self-Service User Access Provisioning Portal. Very long, so we abbreviate it as SSUAP. The idea is to bring some of the work that you do as an Approva specialist, especially the work around provisioning access to systems, out of the realm of the highly expensive technical specialist who is busy enough anyway, and bring that back to the end user as much as possible. Either the final end user who can be enabled to request provisioning themselves, or a more generic IT help desk that can perform those duties. In order to do that, the portal is abstracting from the technical information stored in IRC, and is changing the email request-based request situation by a portal customized to the look and feel of the organization, whereby the end user or the IT service desk can request that provisioning in layman's terms, but still it is then fired off to Approva so that all the Approva checks and balances are completely applied and you don't lose any control there. What is it? It is essentially a portal which we put on top on the Access Manager module of IRC. Very user-friendly. You can put in your own business unit descriptions, your company look and feel. It's very self-explaining. And as a value, you will have a 24/7 user service which covers most of the standards requests automatically. And you will see that it has a very short ROI and also a very good driver to look at your provisioning process and to optimize your provisioning process. And the last extension that I want to introduce is called AnyConnect. And again, a standard approach customized to the needs, enabling to hook up any ERP and homegrown application to IRC, even if there's not a standard connector or adapter available today. It covers both access control and transaction monitoring, and I will tell you why we do that. And it is a no surprise approach end-to-end, from planning workshop with your stakeholders to set the requirements up to a working handed over system. Why would you want to do that? As Infor is releasing more and more adapters, it is impossible for them to deliver adapters for each and every version of their own ERP or other ERP vendors' systems. They will be coming more and more in the future, but they will always focus on the latest versions around and will not help you if you want to keep all the versions hooked up. Another element in that is that most of the ERPs that we're talking about, anything ranging from Navision to M3 and BPCS, there's a high level of customization around. Additional transactions and additional tables have been brought in over time, so no standard adapter will be able to cover that completely. There is also a demand to have both an eye for the access control and the transaction monitoring element. Traditionally, large organizations, when they started SOX-driven, they were only interested in access control. But organizations that use ERPs like Navision or M3 are also getting more and more interested in this world. Maybe not as the primary reason to go to IRC, but in combination with transaction monitoring, and that is focusing on also optimizing your financial processes, it is a good combination. What we do is we deliver a best practice set of access control rules for segregation and duty and sensitive access that will work with most of the ERPs and homegrown systems out there, and we will adjust that during our process if and when needed. And we will deliver out of the box a base set of up to 15 transaction monitoring rules based on a list in discussions we had with Big 5, Big 6 companies on what an external auditor would like to look for in transaction monitoring. This covers elements out of order to cash, procure to pay, and general ledger topics. It's a good starting kit to get to the essence of transaction monitoring, which of course over time can be extended. We deliver this as an end-to-end solution, and of course it is Infor endorsed. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Hans. That's a very insightful tour through those three major capabilities. I think that's very good news. So I'm very pleased to introduce now Tom Passay, who's the product manager for Approva, Infor Risk Compliance, based in Minneapolis. And he's going to talk to us about product vision and roadmap update and plans. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, as a product manager for the Infor Risk and Compliance Solution Suite, I'm representing a growing team of more than 60 engineers and architects supporting the entire product suite for Approva and additional components. So Dan, with that, I need to show a disclaimer slide, because I'm going to talk about a few things that we're definitely going to try to deliver, and I think I can't guarantee that our engineers are going to deliver everything I'm going to talk about, but I'm 99% sure that we'll be able to meet those expectations. So let's move on to some of the topics that I'm going to talk about. Let's level set. Right now, the vision for risk and compliance really is all about this one particular diagram. And this summarizes what a controls monitoring solution offers. Really enables both preventative as well as detective controls monitoring. Because if you see at the bottom, we have all the different systems that you need to monitor for compliance: financial systems, purchasing, ERP, etc. And as you move up, you see the blue bars at the top. You need to provide access to those applications. For example, what can users do? What can anyone perform? And what security have they been set up to do? And also in the bottom two bars, what did they do? Not only do you set up for Sarbanes-Oxley control what they can have access to, but you have to monitor what they have done, just to make sure that there's no violations or exceptions to compliance going on. Because, what did the purchasing manager do with their ability to create a vendor and also pay that vendor? Was there a compliance violation? That's really important to the stakeholders. And as you can see, there's multiple stakeholders at the top there. They include, the personnel across audit, finance, and information technology. And finally, you can see the orange vertical bars, across the blue in the middle. These really show the various areas that you need to monitor within those systems. These are the controls for finance, regulatory compliance, risk, audit, policies, etc. as we are expanding these controls in upcoming releases, as you'll see in the upcoming slides. Moving on, for more vision, we're going to continue to deliver additional components for the Approva solution. And the vision for IRC Approva includes not only the current Approva dashboard functionality, as any of you that have upgraded to version 10 have found, but also allows you to do searching that allows you quick access for information, quick access for to-dos, reports, and those notifications. And of course, it's all role-driven security. Exceptions that are easily identified across all those monitored systems with alerts that allow you direct access to drill into that information, to start researching some of the issues with your colleagues. And of course, all on an audit trail for your audit for attestation, as well as, coming in the next release, we're going to enhance this 360-degree view of controls and risk management. And we're going to allow you to go ahead and provide this, not only in standard delivered reports and queries, but allow you to build your own queries and reports with the new Infor Business Intelligence query tools, as well as take all of that across all of your mobile devices. So mobility is going to be enabled for the upcoming release of Infor Risk and Compliance. These are just some, these are the components that are really important. Application security and user access, process and transaction monitoring for across all of the different processes within your business applications. And of course, don't forget about, highlighting the system and configuration monitoring. So once you implement, you got to make sure that any changes that are done are monitored as well. And finally, the certification. This is, again, for that auditor attestation that allows an easy and automatic certification of your user security for Sarbanes-Oxley and other policies that you've put across your organizations. All right, so as we really get into the heart of, this is a product management slide, and this is really what I use across, the deliveries that are coming forward this year and in 2017, and then further on down into the new releases. And as you can see here, we just had a release in February for release 10.02.4 with really which was some fixes for several customers. And now in July, we're coming out with Approva 10.03, which is going to include many new feature enhancements for you and the customer, you as a customer community. And some of those include moving on to the enhancements. So we have all the hot fixes, of course, and 35 plus new customer enhancements that were forwarded to us through our enhancement request environment, through Consider Solutions, through their consultants, as well as, these are going to be improvements, as you'll see in the next slide, but we're continuing to deliver more and more SAP adapters, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. We do have some great core module platform changes, many improvements, and not only for functionality, but as well as performance, as well as security. Things such as dashboard scoping updates and improved dashboard libraries are now available. Studio changes if you're using Studio, certification manager changes, as well as moving on to the third-party operating system that you need to stay up to date with your providers from third-party in terms of operating system, databases, and web browsers. So we're staying in alignment with them as well. Finally, into the December release that we're looking at later this year, we're also releasing a cloud version. I mean, cloud has become very important for many of you as customers across the different industries. And as you can see, and we'll drill into some of those features that what we call Cloud Edition 11 is going to provide. Moving into that feature list. Next slide, please. Is we have, I know that not all of your systems are going to be in the cloud, so we're supporting what's called a hybrid, on-premise and cloud transport mechanism that allows you to move your ERP monitored information and analysis into what we would call the risk and compliance cloud. And so we provide capabilities for high-performant data extraction and transport from your environment into the Infor cloud to do that analysis with Approva IRC. And of course, additional adapters, with advanced connectivity features. For example, SAP S/4HANA, right, is one of the areas that we're really intent on delivering for you, and we've got our research is going on in terms of how can we best provide, the SAP for Business Suite, applications that are coming out, and of course, also the BI analytics and reporting. We know that it's important to have compliance analytics and key risk indicators that are available for executive decision makers, not only for the compliance officers and auditors within your organizations. All right, and one of the areas that we're expanding into, and really from requests from clients like yourself, is export compliance, and this really involves when you're manufacturing items and products and you're shipping globally, and for example, military grade materials that you're going to be shipping to countries that are on trade sanction lists or blacklist items, or an OFAC, which is controlling assets. We can't trade with this particular country in the Middle East, or we can't trade with this particular country that we have trade sanctions with today. So anyway, those are some of the compliance benefits. So really, we're again looking to prevent risky business, I guess, across the different industries, and this is really stopping violations to reduce costs and, of course, create a better, supply chain efficiency across all of, import and export activities within your manufacturing and other intellectual property distribution channels. So anyway, we're really providing peace of mind through our proactive protection. And so that kind of wraps up, and please enter in the chat any additional questions for the Approva IRC roadmap, and I'll try to address those as we get into the Q&A session. Thanks, Dan. Back to you.
Tom. Thank you, Tom. That was excellent. Good to see where it's all going. And as Tom says, please ask questions now. You've got direct access, so get all your questions in and make this as valuable an exercise as possible. So thank you all. So I'm very pleased now to ask Steve Rooney back to give some perspectives about best practices and recommendations from implementing Infor Risk and Compliance in global organizations, and some of the experiences you might want to apply yourselves. So Steve.
Thanks again, Dan. So we've seen what plans are for the product. We now thought we would spend just a few minutes touching on some of the key practical recommendations, suggestions to give best opportunity for a successful risk and compliance initiative and successful use of Infor Risk and Compliance. So just coming back briefly to the Success Framework, which Hans touched on earlier. So the slide shows our Success Framework and includes all of the different pieces that need to be considered to form a solid platform for success in a risk and compliance program. Now, one of these is automation and enabling technology, but the technology alone will not bring success. All of the pieces, technology related, process related, people related, need consideration. However, if we start with the technology, so some of the following points on this slide, they may appear quite basic and very obvious. However, it's not uncommon that a GRC project is derailed because the technical platform was not sufficiently specified or had not been actively maintained. In a few cases, certainly I've seen, it's only when the annual audit has been in progress that somebody starts complaining that the risk and compliance tool is not working properly. So the points made here are not difficult, but I would suggest it's a false economy if we try to cut corners. So making sure you've got the appropriately specified hardware and the right infrastructure software, making sure the technical housekeeping procedures are known and implemented, making sure the ERP owners communicate any planned changes on the ERP side, as there may also be impacts on the IRC tool side. Ensuring the technical support team are aware of the application-specific characteristics of IRC. Every application has its own special needs, and being aware of those for IRC is no different to other applications. And also making sure that you have sustainable support so that the technical maintenance activities and skills are sustained as people change roles and move on, and as we've seen in many cases that perhaps the service provider providing the support changes. Moving on to the business operating model, so just a few key points here, again from experiences at many different companies. What makes a difference to a successful operating model from a business perspective? So first of all, simplify the process for the business reviewers. The tool has lots of information and can produce many reports in many different formats. However, it's the quality of the content and how the information is communicated that can make a big difference. So remediation of the risk being reported has to be a business-focused activity owned by the business. However, it's through the technical detail that we, in most cases, identify the business risk. But the key point here is don't let the business context be buried in technical detail. So use simple, clear reports and explain the business context. Moving on to progress. Again, perhaps an obvious point, but if you don't track progress, you don't know whether you're making progress. So we could be working very hard, analyzing our data, generating reports, but not enough action is being taken to remediate the reported risks. And how do we know if our program is a success if we're not tracking progress over time? And it's also very helpful to compare within the organization across different business units to identify relative risk across the organization. So some suggestions there in terms of ways to measure progress over time. So from an access perspective, numbers of open risk violations, relative numbers of mitigated violations. On the transaction monitoring side, the value of the transactions that are at risk and the value saved through proactive action taken. On compensating controls, now this is an area where over time, where what has been agreed at a point in the past can be forgotten or not handed over. So risks in your ERP system and therefore in the business process are not reported as open, but also are not being effectively mitigated. Now this could be due to a change of resources or just to the passage of time that the compensating controls are not being actively executed or actively monitored. So periodic reviews of the compensating controls are essential to ensure that the compensating control remains appropriate and the ownership is clear from both a is it appropriate perspective, are the excluded users assigned to that compensating control, do they still remain appropriate to be excluded, and also that the ownership for execution of the compensating control is clear and the compensating control is actually being executed. Moving on to a business value perspective, from a practical standpoint, what are the key value points of a risk and compliance initiative using IRC or Approva? So we've put together a top 5. So starting with, I guess, the area that most companies do start from. So avoiding audit issues and deficiencies by proactively reviewing access and configuration of your ERP systems. Aligning with your auditor, so you are monitoring the areas that they will be checking in their annual audit, so that you can proactively handle anything that might in the past have come up during the audit. Recently we've seen particular focus on access to powerful IT transactions and access to custom transactions, which is an area which is often overlooked. Then moving on to reducing the costs and speeding the turnaround time by automating provisioning to your ERP systems in a controlled way. So again, this touches on a point that Hans was making earlier. So typically much of that provisioning process, many implementations have some non-value added steps. By automating those non-value added steps, one, we can make sure the process is faster, so business users get their access in a shorter time frame, and those unnecessary bottlenecks are eliminated, and we get rid of those midway manual reinterpretations. Third point here, coming back to the compensating controls, looking to reduce dependency on manual steps to mitigate open SOD risk. So wherever automation can help with those compensating controls, then look to automate such that the effort needed to execute the manual compensating control is reduced or eliminated, and reduces the risk that the compensating control falls into disuse. Final 2 points, looking to establish greater insight into the financial processes that are supported by ERP systems by automatically accumulating and retaining a body of data, both current and historical, of the transactions in a form that is suitable for review and analysis, such that we are better placed to identify those non-standard transactions, any unusual patterns, with a view to identifying potentially fraudulent activity, wastage, and also looking to optimize efficiency. Final point on the business value standpoint, looking to automate the audit required periodic reviews and attestations. So typically these are quite manual oriented, emails, spreadsheets, a need to gather data, a need to coordinate the process to review. Typically in the context of things like user access reviews, emergency access, and again, compensating controls. And finally, one more slide, and this is the homework slide. So we've put together a checklist, and be interesting to know whether you agree with this list. But for a successful initiative, we believe you should be able to answer yes to all of these questions. And if you have any no's, then it's certainly worth asking why it is a no, validating whether you believe the item is important to you and your GRC initiative, and is it impacting the success of your initiative, and from there decide if action is needed.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for that tour through best practices and recommendations. I appreciate that. It was good thought, those 5 key issues. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to accelerate through these so we can get to your questions. Please add to the questions. Keep them coming. This is all for your benefit. So just quick considerations for a deeper dive. We've covered a lot of topics. We provide a lot of information. There's in the time-honored fashion, another 5. You might want to think about, well, if you haven't upgraded, do think about the upgrade to Infor Risk Compliance 10. You want to get that done this year if at all possible. We've talked about efficient, compliant user access provisioning through this portal. You might want to consider that. Extending the landscape for monitoring, both for control and compliance, broader risk assurance, and process optimization, using AnyConnect and perhaps engaging in some discovery around that. We talked about end-to-end GRC integration and the relationship between enterprise risk management, continuous controls monitoring, and transaction-level monitoring. Again, that's something, if that's on your agenda, you may want to talk about that, how to get a holistic end-to-end process. And then this GRC Success Framework, making sure that your Infor Risk and Compliance implementation program is on track and refreshed, and you've got stakeholders engaged, you've got the right stakeholders, you're clear what outcomes people need. I'd even add to this the Global Process Owners Summit I'm at currently. Master data governance, master data management is a key issue, and again, there's a deeper dive you can do on that, also using the Process Insights capability. So those are something for you to think about. I will come to some conclusions before we get to your Q&A. Keep the questions coming. Basically, I think coming back around to the beginning, it's very clear that a lot has changed in our insights on processes and risk and compliance and optimization. The fact is now it's very clear that risk management and business performance are 2 sides of the same coin. We're getting increasing demands on both sides, but if we're smart, we can balance that the issue of the key risk indicators and the key performance indicators, bringing it together, optimize operations, manage risk. If you think about that, it's a very, very powerful insight. We've run a couple of webcasts on that very topic, so I won't go in any more detail now, but it's definitely a way of maximizing the value and getting more bang for your buck. I'd say we've been on this road, the full journey with Infor, and before that Approva. It's come a long way in the past 12 years. We've been working on that with the team. We've seen substantial enhanced capabilities around the control and compliance world, broader risk assurance, FCPA and other compliance and risk regimes, process optimization. As Consider Solutions, we're working closely with Infor as both a product, as you've seen with some of the extensions, a service and support partner. We're driving innovation in collaboration with the product team and the engineering teams. So I do ask you that you can exploit the Consider channel for expertise and delivery around product, deep product expertise, process, program management, stakeholder management, and people. So we will be talking to you, and the Infor guys will be talking to you over the coming weeks and months to make sure that we're aligned, discussing plans, challenges, and tactics. So Q&A. I will start coming through these questions. So let's start with the list of questions. So first one, I think we touched on this, but it's an important one for any SAP, the SAP customer base. What are the plans for SAP HANA support in IRC? So, Tom, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we've already delivered, for the traditional SAP environments running against the HANA database. So we've got the BI, NetWeaver, ECC, and SRM adapters, etc., that are already available. And as far as the SAP Business Suite for HANA, our engineers are now looking at the best and most efficient way for integration with those new business suites that have appeared and are continuing to come from SAP. So we're working with SAP, and we've got an integration team that is working diligently on the next release, which will is planned to support S/4HANA.
Thanks very much, Tom. Appreciate that. One more question here. Audit have commented we have no visibility on compensating controls. What do you advise? I guess that's one for you, Steve. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Yeah, I guess it's a topic we touched on earlier, and it's not an uncommon situation. So first, I'd say make sure you only have compensating controls that are really needed. So if you can remediate the risk by segregating activities, then that is the first course of action. By doing this, there is no need for a compensating control and no need for the associated effort and ongoing checks. And we advise looking at the end-to-end process in the context of the organization and confirm where there may be a need for compensating controls. And from there, we can identify what controls are suitable for automated support, as again we mentioned earlier, therefore minimizing ongoing manual effort. And where there is a need for compensating control, again coming back to the earlier points, just make sure that the nature of that control and the ownership for execution and evidence is understood and periodically reinforced.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So basically, when you know what the compensating controls are and you've got the right ones, automate them. That's okay. That's excellent. We have a bunch of questions here, quite a large, but we are now up to our 1 hour time slot. We promised to be considerate of your time, so I think we're going to have to call it a halt there. We will follow up with every other question by email, and we'll be talking to you, as I say, about your plans, challenges, and tactics. If you've got any other questions which you haven't had time to enter here, please send them to Emma at this email address. Thank you very much for your attendance. I know for some of you it's been very late at night, and some of you it's been early in the morning. So from Seattle, Minneapolis, Amsterdam, and London, thank you very much. Thank you to the panel, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.